have more powers to punish companies which fail to protect children. Baroness Biban Kidron, a crossbench peer who campaigns to protect children's rights online, told LBC that the government needs to do more.
Government's first duty is to keep its citizens safe. Children online are your citizens, and you have not acted swiftly. I have made, and many colleagues have made, representations about risky features, things like live streaming, private messaging, and so on.
Meanwhile, a Facebook whistleblower has told LBC Elon Musk's takeover of Twitter changed everything with online safety. Francis Howan says Facebook had previously been investigating and investing in safeguards before the billionaire began sacking half his staff. Having just had her first child, she says there's no way she'd let a 9-year-old use social media.
What ends up happening is you create a generation of kids that feels very anxious and feels very less than, when they could be spending that time, finding who they are, developing skills. So particularly on the issue of kids, we need to stand up and demand more, because time's running out. That 9-year-old never gets to be 9 again. But they will live with how they were shaped by Instagram for the rest of their lives.
Well, Meta, which owns Facebook, says its Instagram teen accounts limit the people who can contact teenagers and the content they see. It's reported one person is unaccounted for after an oil tanker and cargo ship crashed and caught fire in the North Sea. 36 people have been brought ashore with the environmental impact not yet known. Stuart Rivers is the CEO of the Merchant Navy Welfare Board and has been speaking to LBC News.
It seems quite extraordinary, really, that an incident like this should happen, bearing in mind the technology that are on board modern ships, with radar systems and AIS, which is automatic identification systems.
The Prime Minister has spoken to President Trump ahead of talks between the US and Ukraine in Saudi Arabia. Volodymyr Zelensky has arrived in the country, with the US Secretary of State also on his way. And the Kings kicked off a baton relay at Buckingham Palace ahead of the Commonwealth Games in Glasgow. It marks 500 days until the event starts next July. In the city, the FTSE 100s closed down 79 points at 8,600. The pound buys $1.28 and €1.19. LBC weather: patchy rain in the south tonight, drier and clearer elsewhere, with some showers drifting into northeast England, a low of -2. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Daryl Jackson.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. Cross Question with Iain Dale.
Hello and welcome to Monday's Cross Question. Let me tell you who's on our panel tonight. Rebecca Smith is next to me on my left. She is Conservative MP for South West Devon. Next to her is Rhun up Iorwerth, who is leader of Plaid Cymru and a member of the Senedd for Ynys. To my right is Kiki McDonough, businesswoman known for designing fine jewellery. And next to her, Andrew Fisher, who is not known for designing fine jewellery. He's a columnist for the iPaper, former advisor to Jeremy Corbyn, unless he's got a sideline that I don't know anything about. 0345 6060 973 is the number to call. You can WhatsApp on that number, and you can text 84850, and we'd love it if you'd watch us on Global Player.
Call 0345 6060 973. Tweet at LBC. Text 84850. Cross Question with Iain Dale. This is LBC.
Right, let's start off with a question from Scott in West Hampstead, who's a regular contributor to the programme, who tells us he's a child psychologist. What more can government, tech companies, the regulators, parents and schools do to limit the harm caused by children's addiction to their smartphones? Or has the genie already escaped from the bottle and caused irreparable damage to a whole generation of children? I don't know which of you have children on the panel. Andrew, go on.
Yeah,
you nodded first.
I mean, on that note, I'll start off by standing up for children a bit. I mean, I don't think they're all addicted to smartphones. I don't think this is a terrible generation. I mean, my son is nearly 12. He and his friends seem like lovely young people. They're not terrible, rude, stuck on their smartphone and ignoring, kind of grown-ups or interaction with each other. I think they have technology, and they've grown up in a world that's completely different to me. I mean, harmful content, I don't know how I would have got hold of some of the things that people can get hold of when I was their age. I mean, there was the local library and 4 television channels, that was it. So, parents didn't have such a tough job, and parents have got a difficult job now, because most children, certainly of secondary school age, have got either a computer or an iPad of some variety, not necessarily that brand, a smartphone. And, you can't be over their shoulder policing that the entire time. There are locks and security controls on those sort of things that you can add on so that children have kind of limited access to the internet.
But I wonder what percentage
of
parents are capable of doing that.
Well, I'm not. It's my wife who works in web development, thankfully, and is very IT savvy, so I'd be lost completely. But you're right. There is an issue with that, and I think there has to be a responsibility on the tech companies to do more. And we've seen, actually, I think from Starmer's visit to the White House, actually, where J.D. Vance had a pop about what he called free speech. Actually, what he meant was regulating tech companies and their right to be able to pump out whatever they want. And, unfortunately, we've got a government in the US where most of these social media companies are based that is purely in the pockets of these social media companies and is willing to advocate for them pretty brutally in negotiations. So there is a real battle to be had here, I think, about that. And it'll be interesting to see how well when I think it's next week, isn't it, some of the first regulations come in from the Online Safety Act. Be interesting to see how well Ofcom does in policing it, because they haven't always done a great job on broadcasters. Not this fine one, obviously, but some other ones
they do a brilliant job,
less
Andrew.
Rebuked. Yes, well, you would say that, wouldn't you? But
fine organisation.
Yes, I think it's been a little more haphazard with some other broadcasters that I won't advertise on LBC.
That's not.
No.
I have seen you on that one.
No, you haven't.
Have I
no.
not? Have I imagined it?
If we're talking about the same one.
I think we are.
Yeah. No.
Okay, all right. I haven't then. Kiki?
Well, I think I'm rather with Australia on this one. I think children are so clever now that I think they're cleverer than the tech companies, actually. They can find their way into machines and this and that, and they watch all sorts of things. And I think that it's not going to make a huge amount of difference. And I think it's a terrible shame, because I think children are no longer allowed to be children because they have access to so much stuff. And it just, in the end, is going to soak their brains, I think. And I mean, my sons are older, but they didn't have any of that. They were just told to go away and do something, and if they got bored, just do something else, And so I think children need that opportunity, certainly at the age of 5, 6, 7, to maybe get very good at sport or maybe do something else than sit on their phones. And it's terribly tempting. I mean, I'm addicted to my phone. I wake up in the morning and I turn my phone on and I'm thinking, Kiki, what are you doing? Just relax, turn the light on, So I think you have either got to ban it or just soak it up, because I just think...
But in what you're really saying is it's the parents' responsibility.
Totally.
The parents have got to say no.
They have, but parents these days seem to be intimidated by their children.
But why can't we get it into people's minds that we don't allow people to drive cars until they're 17? And I mean, my age group, I was terribly excited when I could sort of get my driving licence at 17. It's something to really look forward to. Why can't we do that for social media as well?
Yeah, I think that what we have to remember is that there are a huge number of parents out there who haven't got time to police their children.
Don't have them in the first place, then.
Well, don't have them in the first place. I'm not quite sure that's the answer, but...
I'm not joking. I genuinely believe that. If you can't be a parent, if you haven't got time to teach your children how to brush their teeth rather than leave it to primary school teachers, don't have them in the first place.
But I think the parents are working, and they're working all hours. Their children come home and they go in the door and they told to get on with their homework, and the parents say, I'll be back at 5, and they get home at 4. They what are they going to do? Do their homework, their history homework and geography homework, or are they going to sit on their phone? I mean, I would sit on my phone because I can't bear geography. But, I mean,
it's my favourite subject.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, well done you. Is
I knew everything about the Oxbow Lake. Rebecca Smith.
Well, I don't have children, but I have nieces and nephews, and I have plenty of friends with children. And when I sit and have these sorts of conversations with them, I think the thing that I tend to express is, I don't know how you do it, because I think having children in this day and age, I'm a child of the early 80s, it's completely different. It was 4 channels and a library, and, we kind of Ready Steady Cook, I think, was about as far as I went after school. If I got the television first, I'd at least stick Ready Steady Cook on before my siblings came home. I don't think it's necessarily an either or. The question was, what more can be done, or is it too late? I think for some, there is definitely an addiction there that, over time, even as adults, I think we can get out of that position. I've certainly stopped looking at, until I became an MP, I'd stopped looking at my phone until 9 o'clock in the morning.
9 o'clock,
I used to, I disciplined myself out of it. But I think I do think there is more we can do. And I think one of the things that came up in a conversation a couple of weekends ago when I was away with my friends who've all got children of a variety of ages up to kind of 20 was this thing called a dumb phone. Because I recognise that in this day and age, parents do want to have that access to their child. They want to be able to say, oh, I'm on the bus, I'm on my way home, Mum. And so I think there's this swing, certainly in some quarters, to go back to the old kind of Nokia brick, the phones available, that literally just do the phoning and that's it, and doesn't have all the other things, which then arguably, whether you're, as a parent, tech savvy or not, you can at least type in a couple of phone numbers. And okay, it doesn't remove all of the harm, because we all know those phones usually text message as well, but at least you're not accessing things like the porn that we know is available online. And so I think more needs to be done to restrict what adults can see as well, because if it's restricting what adults can see online, the knock-on impact is that children are going to benefit from that as well. And I think there's a broader question about what we all can see on the internet, and some of that is way too extreme in my view. And, you know, finding that balance between freedom and what's actually a bit illegal, if not a lot illegal, is going to be key. So, yeah, my friends and family have my deepest sympathy, but ultimately I think, you know, where I can help, I suppose, as a politician, is at least looking to see what more could be done in legislation to find that balance.
Rhun.
My kids are all in their 20s now, so I guess they can do what they want. I think the case you make for giving children simpler phones might work with the very, very youngest children, but of course there's a real awareness amongst certainly very young teenagers, or probably younger than that, of the technology that they can have. Now, like Andrew, there's a very, very long list of things that I disagree with JD Vance on, and on somehow giving the tech companies and the social media companies free rein to do what they like with social media is one of those. And it's quite clear that those companies can put regulation in place, can take proactive measures that can shelter children from things that they can very, very easily have access to now. I'm not keen on the use of the word addiction either, because that somehow implies that you can wean people off something altogether. The technology is just part of life now. There's no point trying to hide away from that, and they are a fantastic power for good if used properly. But there's so much that can be done to regulate, to shelter, to make it not so easy for harm to be caused.
And of course, it's very difficult to say, well, I mean, for example, introducing the Nokia brick phones again, I mean, I think it's probably quite easy for mobile phone companies to create a product which even kids would see as cool, even though it doesn't do an awful lot. But then you have a situation like, I've got a friend who's not living with the child's mother. The child's 8 years old, uses FaceTime to talk to his dad every evening. Well, you wouldn't be able to do that on a Nokia phone.
The chances are mum and dad have got a device that...
Well, I suppose so, but he can contact his father when he likes and do a FaceTime video with him. So you'd penalise that child for really not doing anything bad.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm old enough to not have had any access to that. You know, I'd ring my father and say, I can't talk to you now, and didn't speak to him again for 3 weeks, you know. So, I've got to talk to my dad now, really? Well, does it have to be done there and then, unless you've had some, an accident or something like that? Can you tell Dad to ring me back at 6 o'clock or something, or vice versa? It has created an immediacy on everything. Everything. It's like the internet. You order a packet of biscuits or something, I don't know, and it's there. And if it's not there by 6 o'clock, you want to know why, and isn't it hopeless? And you think, hang on, just need to calm down a bit, because this addiction to immediacy, I think, is very damaging.
I think it's not just damaging for children either. I mean, I think we've had the Kyle Clifford case this week as well, which is, that awful case where, this man had murdered 3 women after watching Andrew Tate videos on YouTube. Now, that content, I think, is harmful regardless of whatever age you are. It's not just children that are influenced by this. And, there have been other cases of radicalisation online that isn't just children or teenagers It's men of various ages as well, and I think there does have to be some regulation of that. And Ian, I know you're on what used to be known as Twitter, and that's certainly got worse since the regulations have come off that. The level of abuse on it, that is not taken down, because obviously with these sort of things like YouTube, like any sort of social media, you can upload to it, and anything can be uploaded. The question is, can it be taken down? And that's the question. And if you haven't got proactive kind of regulation of that, and that needs to be nation states standing up to these companies, which is easier said than done, admittedly, when you've got a very forceful US government backing them up to the hilt.
Quick word on whether it should be the parents or the state, perhaps. I think it's certainly both, and there are measures that a parent can take to oversee, to use some parental controls, for example, if they're technologically savvy enough. But I have no doubt that there is a role for the states, for schools, for other elements of the public sphere to intervene. And you joked about it a few minutes ago, Ian, but I still really, really remember vividly being taught how to brush my teeth properly when that was a part of the sort of health curriculum at school. And that's not because my mother and father didn't teach me how to brush my teeth. They did, and they taught me the importance of it. But actually, those further measures taken by the school helped me look after my teeth when I was growing older. So I think it's both.
I think my point was I don't expect primary school teachers to do that. I mean, if they have a health visitor coming in, fair enough. But teachers have enough burdens on them already, and we don't need to place more on them.
And I understand what you say, but it will be, teachers will play a part in educating children and young people about how to be safe online, and that's despite having to teach them and go through a curriculum and keep them safe in all sorts of different ways. There are roles for different actors to play here.
But there's practically as well, Ian, I mean, just to slightly come back at you, I suppose, on that point about dentistry, is that actually one of the major admissions for A&E at the moment for young people is dental problems, and that's a real issue. Now, of course, ideally it should be the parents do that, but I remember those public education films as well in the early 80s of showing you how to brush your teeth or cross the road and all those things you got shown when the TV was wheeled into the school classroom.
Those were the days.
Those were the good old days, yeah. No,
black and white as well.
That was high-tech things that we got excited about then. But, there is a role, and there is a practical need. There are plenty of areas of the country that are dentistry deserts, where there aren't available dentists, and if you have got a health problem where, children are showing up at A&E with cavities and so on, and all the risk of infection and so on that goes with that, then that's a practical solution to it. It's not ideal, I agree with you.
Can I come in on that, though? Because this is actually something we've seen in the southwest, where you do have a dental desert. And, one of the challenges is we've got this great new dental school, but everybody goes back to where they came from once they're qualified. So we've got a real retention issue there. But one of the things we have done is this thing called Open Wide Step Inside, and a scheme to get people doing more teeth brushing.
You are straight away.
It's had to happen because parents aren't. So I think it's, why are... Obviously, there is that lack of dentists, but equally... there must be an issue with parental responsibility as well, because otherwise we wouldn't have those high numbers of children going to A&E, because I think it is that both piece. And I don't think we should be getting... I think the challenge we have in this day and age is with big issues like this and social media and those, is the state tries to become the parent to catch the children that's parents aren't doing the job properly, but then it potentially does that overstep, because it is that balance between responsibility.
Why don't you get the parents to go into the schools and clean their teeth every morning?
Well, maybe the parents need to be taught.
Because they're hard at work.
Well, a lot of them aren't. Maybe not. Quite a lot of them aren't.
To draw out the health comparison further, if we can, we must remember that online harm is causing mental health problems for children and young people. And one of the things
changing their minds, I think.
Yeah, and one of the things that we're saying is alongside the kind of regulatory changes that we'd like to see put in place, real proactive action by governments and the tech companies working together, we need to see, a stepping up in the mental health support that's given to young people that inevitably will still be affected no matter what kind of steps we take.
Well, Scott, I think you got your money's worth there on that one. Thank you very much indeed for your text. We'll take more texts and calls in just a moment. 0345 6060 973. It's 19 minutes past 8.
This is LBC. Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC.
Let me reintroduce the panel. Rhun ap Iorwerth, his leader of Plaid Cymru, Kiki McDonough, businesswoman, Rebecca Smith, Conservative MP, and Andrew Fisher, who's just informed us he's been a vegetarian for 32 years.
33, actually.
33.
Yes, sorry, yeah.
You don't have any hankerings at all?
No, not for meat, no.
Anyway, let's move on. Jessie is in Derbyshire, and this is a text question. The MP who was convicted of assaulting a constituent is now quitting Parliament. What would it say about Keir Starmer's record as PM if Labour loses the by-election? Well, Runcorn and Helsby is set to hold a by-election in a few weeks' time after Mike Amesbury announced today that he will begin winding up his office before resigning as an MP, quote, as soon as possible. That should mean tonight, I think. He was given a 10-week prison sentence, suspended for 2 years, after he admitted assaulting a constituent, Paul Fellows, last October. Mr Amesbury was elected as a Labour MP with a majority of 14,696 over Reform UK, with the Conservatives getting almost 1,000 votes fewer than Reform. So what would it say about Keir Starmer's record if they lost? Rhun?
I can announce here that Plaid Cymru will not be standing in the forthcoming by-election.
Well, that's useful to know.
In Runcorn. You heard it here.
Headlines coming from this programme.
And I guess, as it won't be an election that we take a part in, I should leave it to Keir Starmer and others to comment on what harm there would be. Clearly, there's going to be a huge amount of interest, not only in whether Keir Starmer loses, but in whether the insurgency of the right can bring a seat for reform. I think it's important for us at junctions like this in by-elections, wherever they are, to put to the test the rather vacuous politics put forward by that particular party. We had a by-election for a council in Wales only last week where Reform chucked everything at it, and Plaid won with 57% of the vote. And I think it's really, really important that the community champions put forward their positive visions rather than a party
but
like Reform
win the local elections in Wales next year. Sorry, it was the Senedd elections rather.
They said they would win in that by-election on the council last week as well, and they most certainly did not. They got thumped. But I think we should take their threat very, very seriously. Why would we not? This is a global phenomenon of the growth of the right that is not the kind of politics that serves our communities well, and we need to take every opportunity in elections like this to make that case. This particular election, as I say, we won't be playing a part in it. Maybe,
but if you were a betting man,
I don't know. I mean, it's clearly coming at a time when Labour has been under a huge amount of pressure. They will need to win it. Nigel Farage will need to win it too. I know which side I would be on if I was a Plaid Cymru candidate in an election like that, and putting the case for a more progressive and a more constructive kind of politics than is put forward by the right.
Rebecca, now, we're not mid-term yet. I mean, no one can say that after, and it was 7-8 months now. But the Conservatives ought to be looking to winning by-elections like this, shouldn't they?
Well, I mean, we saw in the election, didn't we, the huge swings, and that was a clear one there where Reform did get those votes off of us. I mean, I think from what I've heard, and this isn't a party position, but just in sort of general conversation, I think the wisdom is this is a fight between Labour and Reform at this particular seat. Again, that's just what I'm hearing around and about rather than my party's perspective on that. I mean, I think the interesting thing is to think, is it doable for them to overtake a 14,500 vote majority to take Labour out? And ultimately, I think we saw some big swings like that in the general election. So, I don't think I'd want to put any money on either side, to be quite honest, because ultimately, I think there's the flip question of what does it say if Labour can hold it in terms of where Reform are at too. So it's a test of both sides, a bit like Rhun has already said. It's a test of what Nigel Farage has been trying to achieve since he got into Parliament, and obviously a huge test for the Labour government to see if what they have done is enough to keep people with them, because ultimately it's their seat to lose, isn't it, rather than reforms to win, perhaps. So, yeah, like I said, I don't think I'd be putting any money on either side at this point in time, because I think it's a tough one.
So you certainly wouldn't be putting any on your party?
Oh, no, I mean, obviously, if we were there, I'd be out campaigning to support them. But in terms of what I'm hearing, in terms of general wisdom on this seat, is it will be a reform Labour.
Kiki?
Well, first of all, we've got 4 years to go before we get to the election, so that
not till this one.
No, but to predict what one seat would be, either Labour reform or whatever, right now is, I think, pretty pointless, because we've got another 4 years and goodness knows where we're going to be in 4 years. I think probably, I mean, at the moment, Keir Starmer's looking good. He's taking command of the, taking command of the peace talks for Zelensky, and I think he's, looking good and prime ministerial and doing all those things. I think Reform are having an argument, and they're probably going to give you down to 4 MPs, not 5. I think maybe Labour might just swing it.
Andrew?
I certainly think Labour will be a bit more confident after the last few days of what's gone on within Reform, and that doesn't look like it's going to abate anytime soon. They've got clear internal warring egos. I don't think it's about anything more than that, really, and that's a problem when you've got a political party that doesn't really have a lot in the way of policy. It has someone to blame, it has a scapegoat, but it doesn't have any serious policies for the country, and that's always the problem with the far right. They'll give you someone to blame, they won't make your life any better. And I hope the people of Runcorn, like I hope people everywhere in Britain, reject that sort of politics generally, and unfortunately it doesn't just reside within Reform. But I think Labour, you look at the opinion polls, Labour's sunk massively since the general election. Keir Starmer's personal ratings, although they've gone up slightly in the last week, it's only slightly and from a very, very low base. So I don't think they can take it for granted, and I'm sure they'll be throwing everything at it. I'm slightly surprised to hear Rebecca kind of almost ruling out the Conservatives.
Well, actually, I've been reflecting on it as you've had this conversation.
You were only narrowly in third.
No, I know.
And I think,
I've been reflecting.
Given the problems with Reform, I would think the Conservatives might be thinking, well, wait a minute, Labour aren't doing well, Reform are imploding, this is a chance for us. We're only narrowly in third.
Well, and to be fair, I have just been sat here thinking that was probably a bit hasty of me, in as much as, You
didn't just get a text from someone.
No, I didn't. I'll probably get it later. I think actually it's worth reflecting a little bit on what's been mentioned in terms of local elections already. And actually, I'm probably just being a bit glass half empty on a Monday evening. But actually, when you look at the local government election results that we've had since the general election, we are actually miles ahead of Reform in terms of winning seats. And Labour are doing abysmally, as you've just said. So, for all of those seats that Reform have fought as a local election, where they've thrown the kitchen sink at it, I think I read these figures right today. Labour, we've won 23, Reform have won 12, and Labour are down 35. So actually, I think I was a bit too sitting on the fence. Maybe actually the statistics there show that it is something we should take seriously.
And I think it's really important as well, isn't it?
I think it's really important to reflect on what is being said. I'm a journalist by profession. I know that there's an excitement among journalists about what Reform might be able to do, looking forward to the next local elections in England next year, the next UK general election all those years away. Will they be able to win power? The same as in Wales, looking forward to next year. There's a different story than that going on. Yeah, the latest big poll, after Labour winning elections for 102 years, has Plaid Cymru in the lead, in a position to be able to take power from Labour, a party with a track record of fighting sort of for fairness, for equality, progression, a more prosperous society and a more equitable. Well, no, we're the ones challenging to remove Labour from that. Well, I've never sought to keep Labour in power because I'm the leader of Plaid Cymru. Why would I want to do that? What you do in a proportional system is where you don't have a party with a majority, you have to find a way of making government work. That's all that Plaid Cymru has done, representing the people that we serve, influencing government. But it's Plaid Cymru in Wales that's in the position, with our full suite of policies on health, on education, on growing the economy, that represents the real option for change, not Reform.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to some more questions in just a moment. 0345 6060 973. It's 8:30. Daryl Jackson has the LBC News headlines.
A crossbench peer has told LBC that the government is not putting children first when it comes to online safety. Baroness Biban Kidron, who campaigns to keep children safe online, says new legislation is not strong enough, adding that risky features like private messaging should have been included. The owner of the container ship which collided with an oil tanker in the North Sea says one of its crew members is missing. 36 other people have been checked over by the ambulance service following the collision off the coast of East Yorkshire. And doctors say Pope Francis is no longer in imminent danger as a result of pneumonia. The Vatican says the 88-year-old remains stable and has consolidated improvements after positive responses to drug treatments. LBC weather: patchy rain in the south tonight, drier and clearer elsewhere, and a low of -2.
This is LBC.
Did you
Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
8:33 on LBC. It's Monday's Cross Question. Our panel is Rhun Iorwerth, leader of... Have I said that right?
This time, yes, correct. Well done.
Yeah, no, I didn't before, did I? Because somebody put on a text saying, "It rhymes with green, you idiot." Was that you? He is leader of Plaid Cymru. Kiki McDonough is a businesswoman. Rebecca Smith, Conservative MP for South West Devon. And Andrew Fisher, columnist for the iPaper, former advisor to Jeremy Corbyn. Bobby in Camden says, is reform anything other than a Nigel Farage vanity project? Now, the background to this, MP Rupert Lowe has accused Mr Farage of a vindictive witch hunt while denying allegations of bullying against two members of staff and of having made violent threats against Reforms Party chairman Zia Youssef. These allegations were made only a day after Mr Lowe told the Daily Mail that Reform is a protest party led by the Messiah, adding that its leader is a fiercely independent individual. I don't think anyone can argue with that latter bit. Andrew Fisher.
I mean, it predominantly is. I think Nigel Farage probably does have quite a bit of vanity. But I think the real problem with it is not about Nigel Farage's ego, or the extent of it. It's about the politics they put forward. And that is quite damaging, I think, because they whip up this kind of division around immigration, sometimes wildly inaccurately as well, it has to be said. And that, I think, does harm
but they talk about
the nature of political debate.
Other political parties seem to try to avoid the subject.
I don't think they do. I mean, Labour's been putting out videos, I completely disagree with the content of them, about how many people they're deporting, and it's on record numbers. The Tories spoke about nothing other than immigration. I mean, there's ridiculous Rwanda plan, which thankfully got defeated in the courts and defeated politically. But, they talked about it non-stop. I mean, the reality is what we don't have in this country is an honest conversation about migration, which is, look, if you look at our social care system and our NHS and our levels of training and pay for those staff, we are inherently reliant upon migration to keep social care and the NHS going. If you look at our universities, and this was a reform made by the last Conservative government, we are entirely reliant for our universities to continue on recruiting foreign students. 400,000 of that net migration is students. They are a net kind of net export of our universities to the rest of the world, which is a good thing. That is cross-subsidising the education of British students. If you want to get migration down, close universities, great, close the NHS, close social care. Is that what we want? That's not the conversation that's being had, though. And instead, we're getting all these things about people on small boats, most of whom, the vast majority, are coming from countries like Syria, Afghanistan, Iraq, and Iran, which are not safe countries.
Well, three of those countries have safe routes and are countries that are on.
Safe routes. That's not
countries,
true.
Afghanistan and Syria have been part of schemes in the past.
They're not currently, and therefore, if we're talking about the current numbers and the people currently coming over, there is no safe route. The reason people from Ukraine didn't cross the channel on perilous dinghies was because we did provide a genuinely safe route for people to come here, and 240,000 people did from Ukraine, and that's good. But why are we saying that's not acceptable when people from Syria, who are fleeing equally as bad persecution and war, are coming here via that route? It's ridiculous. So what we need is actually an adult conversation about migration, not this kind of whipped up rhetoric of divisiveness and this silly debate about numbers without any talk about what's good for the economy or what's a fair refugee system.
I'm just anticipating the digital clip of someone clipping you up saying, Andrew Fisher says, close our universities, close the NHS.
Well, it was that's the logic of actually reducing migration to the tens of thousands.
You can just imagine someone just taking that half sentence.
He was joking.
Kiki.
Well, there are two things about reform, is that they've got 4, but probably, or 5, and will probably go down to 4 MPs. So at the next election, all these hundreds of people are going to come in and suddenly they're all going to be cabinet ministers. How does that work? They haven't got any policies. They're sort of shouting at the air at the moment. And I think, personally, a month ago, I thought he'd peaked. Farage. I thought.
Well, you may be right. Maybe you did.
I think he peaked. I think, I think everyone will get sick and tired of the white noise coming through. And I think, I'm not sure it will burn itself out.
Rebecca.
I always think that questions around reform are really tricky because we often have them in the Westminster bubble. So we have them where we are watching them often not perform in Parliament. They're barely ever there. I think that's something that needs to be called out. They pitch up in Parliament for the debates where they want to make a statement on whatever means it may be. I mean, a classic example was the immigration bill the other day. None of them spoke during the debate. They voted with us on the reasoned amendment, which says we don't want a second reading, and then they forced a vote on the kind of perfunctory second reading vote, and that was their clip. That was their social media. We're the only ones that can do this opposition. Well, actually, no, they weren't, because there had been a whole afternoon of debate with members from the Conservative Party and others speaking up and doing the things that Reform claim they're the only people that can do it. But they weren't even in the chamber. But that doesn't get seen outside of Westminster. And I think this is the challenge we have. And I've had the same flip conversation with Lib Dems and Labour MPs slagging off GB News, for example, because, oh gosh, it's so pointless. And these are people who are our electorate who are choosing to support this party and vote in this way. So I just think we have to take what they're doing seriously, in the sense that there are people out there for whom this is the answer, this is what they're looking for. And I think the challenge is on us to make sure, as Andrew's kind of alluded to, we've got to have the answers to these problems. Now, obviously, what those answers are is going to vary depending on which political party we are. So I don't agree with Andrew and Rhun about how we would tackle that. But like I said, taking it back to that specific debate around immigration, they're not actually in the conversation. They're just doing the soundbite at the end. And if that's how they continue, I think perhaps Kiki's right. They'll burn themselves out. I think the other interesting thing to reflect on is their net zero policy announcement that completely flopped and, ultimately then became just a direction of travel. I think as we see more and more policy ideas, that's where we're going to have the real stuff. But at the end of the day, people that might well live next door to all of us are choosing to vote for them. And I think it's incumbent on all of us to think, what's wrong with our politics that means there's a space for a party like Reform?
I don't think they did themselves any favours. He did himself any favours by siding with Trump after that Zelensky interview. I think that's done some damage, and I think people will look at that and think, ooh, not really, that was not what we thought.
Okay, Rhun.
It's a party led and owned by the most establishment of people, based on blaming them over there. It was Europe/immigration, and now it's just immigration for all the problems that UK governments, successive, both colours, have failed to address properly in the past. They were elected to the then Welsh Assembly, now the Senedd, the Welsh Parliament, in 2016, in a significant number, more than 10% of the intake in the 2016 election were UKIP, essentially the same party. They were all dumped and thrown out in the election that came after that, because people saw that when they were elected, they had nothing to offer whatsoever, because there's no depth there whatsoever. And yes, we should absolutely take it seriously, because it is the incarnation in the UK of that global phenomenon that we should all be very, very concerned about. And yes, it is represented by Trump and Vanceism in the United States. And put the immigration issue to one side, if it's even that, and they switch and look any which way that they think will make them popular on any other issue, and tie themselves up in knots over it. And you know what? We saw them on the Ukraine issue, as Kiki was saying there, for what they are, ready in an instant, in backing Vance and Trump, to throw Zelensky and the people of Ukraine under the bus. That's what Reform is, rather than a party standing up for the values of the UK as a whole. I say that as a Welsh politician, but the UK as a whole, in seeing why we need to stand with the people of Ukraine, and Reform have failed that most basic of tests.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Can I just say...
Just before you do, Andrew in Chelsea says, how can you justify a cross-question without Reform, given their lead in the polls? Well, for the same reason that we can justify having a panel without a Labour MP tonight, because we don't have somebody from each of the political parties on every single panel. We have a balance over time. I think last week we had 2 Reform representatives on the show. So you can't please all of the people all of the time. That's the answer. But then, Rebecca, as a Conservative, you know that.
Well, quite. I think it's just also worth reflecting on the fact that we have had, as Rhun has illustrated, protest votes for a very long time. So what happened in this election is not new. I think the way it's shaped is. So, for example, in my seat, I was newly elected in 2024. But in 2010, 15% of the vote was Lib Dem. That vote disappeared in 2015 when it went UKIP, which then came back to the Conservatives when it was that single issue thing about Europe. And then 17% was Reform. For me, the people that I'm worried about are the Conservatives who didn't bother voting. And that's why, as a local MP and doing what I'm doing in Westminster, I just want to bring them back in to make sure that 6-7% of people who were like, I'm so fed up with politics that I'm not even going to vote one way. And I think sometimes we give Reform more credit than that to me, that shift of 15, 17 is stark. Why would a Lib Dem vote UKIP the next time unless it's
25% of Lib Dem voters voted for Brexit. That's why.
Exactly.
It's 8:44.
LBC Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC. Text 84850.
8:46, Wayne in Norfolk says, I think listening briefly to your panel, it's very disingenuous to dismiss those that vote reform. I'm not sure people did. Personally, I'm a very, very disaffected Conservative, and I did not vote Conservative, nor Labour, nor Reform at the last general election. However, I think it's very cool that they just dismiss those voters over. For me, it's not only disingenuous, but also, I don't think it means cool, also shows a disconnect from what they're seeing in their targeted areas of their constituencies or Westminster, but they don't understand the feeling on the street. Well, I'm sure we'll come back to those sorts of issues. But let's move on to a very important issue from Fred in Portsmouth, who says, with Zelensky and his team now in Saudi Arabia to negotiate what Trump calls a peace plan, has Russia effectively won this war now with Trump's help? Well, the US Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, has said today that both Ukraine and Russia need to come to an understanding that there's no military solution to this situation, adding that Kyiv needs to accept they will not recover the territories which Russia have captured since 2014. Rebecca.
I mean, everybody's shaking their heads around the table, so I think we're very much with Zelensky and with Ukraine and them getting what they need to get back from the Russians. I mean, I think Trump's all over the place on this, isn't he? You know, last week he was enemy number one with Zelensky, and now he's trying to work to negotiate with them. I think ultimately as the UK, we just have to keep our position, which is that we do all we can to see peace, but also to see Ukraine retain that territory that they've lost and regain it. And we do whatever we can to help.
Andrew, is it too simplistic to say that whenever Trump talks about peace, we should substitute the word peace for capitulation? Because that's what it means if Russia is allowed to keep the territory that it's conquered.
Yeah, look, I think we all want an end to the war. I mean, the question always with peace is on what terms, isn't it? And peace only lasts or endures if it's married with justice. And Russia keeping the spoils that it's already got, the bits of Ukraine it's taken, it would not be just. And I think, if you look back at the Second World War in 1940, when we were, scurrying our troops off from Dunkirk, and somebody had said, oh, look, the war's not going very well for you. If the US had come in at that point a year earlier and said, look, I'm sorry, I think you need to just settle at where you are, Europe, I don't think that would be a very healthy place. I don't think Europe would be the place it is today either. So I think, look, war's horrible, and we obviously all want it to stop, but it could stop tomorrow if Putin stopped his illegal war. He's the aggressor in this. He's the one who started this war, unprovoked, invaded Ukraine. That's who the pressure needs to be on, and it's disgusting, really, that Trump seems to be, bargaining with Putin over who can kind of get the spoils of Ukraine. This minerals deal. I mean, you don't do that to allies. If your ally is at war and you're supporting them, you don't then go, well, actually, how much can we get out of this for US interests afterwards? That's not what allies do. That's what you do if you're conquering a country. And it seems to me there seems to be a sort of devil's bargain between Trump and Putin. It's pretty disgusting stuff.
Rhun?
The fact that you have Marco Rubio saying this now, that is the result of what Trump has been doing over the past 2 weeks. Showing his hands from the off, and it's a hand that has always favoured Russia, and all that does is place more and more onus on us as Europeans to stand very, very firmly and to show that our friends in Ukraine that we will not give up on them and their sovereignty and the need to reject and push back Putin's advance, because he will not stop at Ukraine given half a chance.
But the fact is, Europe in general doesn't have the resources to do this, do we? Because we can't provide the guidance for missile systems, which America can and has done. And we've seen the result of them withdrawing that over the last few days.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been very, very worrying. And we've seen the impact, I think, since intelligence was withdrawn and support. I think something like 1,200 sort of missile attacks have come in from Russia, and 800-odd drone attacks. That's what happened. And no, there are no simple answers on how exactly the realignment comes in strengthening Europe's hands. All we know at this point in time is that it somehow has to happen, and that all of us, nations large and small across the European Union, have to stand in solidarity, and I'm pleased to see that happening.
Kiki.
Well, I'm not sure how much more Ukraine or Zelensky can take of this war. I think he looks exhausted on his knees. I think the Ukrainian people have suffered at the hands of the Russians the most appalling war crimes. But I think peace has to be found, and I think it will involve Russia keeping that bit of land. I mean, we've got to be sensible about this, because that's what's going to happen. It's completely wrong, but I think it will. What concerns me is if they do decide that Russia keeps that small bit, Zelensky keeps the rest.
It's 20%.
It's 20%, yeah. But what happens then is they say, well, we'll have a peacekeeping force in there. Well, so Putin waits a couple of years, and then back he comes again. And if we have a peacekeeping force in there, we will then effectively be at war with Russia, which is not ideal at all. And I don't know how this is ever going to end, because Putin has now got Trump pretty much on his side. And I think this is really, really dangerous. And I feel so sorry for those Ukrainian people.
I just wait for Donald Trump to talk about the 20,000 Ukrainian children that are being kidnapped by Russia and demand that they be returned, but not a peep. Not a peep. Follow-up question.
But I don't think he even understands what that involves. I don't think he knows. He's just sitting. Oh, anyway.
A follow-up question from Tom, who says, Democratic US Senator Mark Kelly wrote on X that it's important we stand with Ukraine. Elon Musk replied to tell him he's a traitor. If Musk is right, which he isn't, who does Musk feel that Kelly has betrayed? Anybody want to come in on that one?
Sure.
It's all this transactionalism again, isn't it? You know, that's all it is. It's all it is to Trump. It's all it is to Elon Musk, and it's becoming more and more clear and obvious every day. Absolutely,
it's terrible. It's awful.
I think the thing we forget as well is that we're hearing what Elon Musk and Trump think. We're not hearing what other Republicans think. We're not hearing what others think. And, you know, ultimately, I guess he's a traitor to Trump, isn't he? Because it's Trump's view that this is the case. And obviously we wouldn't agree with that, because we've just had that conversation to say we stand with Ukraine too. So,
Jed says, American stock markets have had another awful day, and Trump isn't ruling out the US having a recession. Do trade wars ever succeed? Well, the S&P 500, Dow Jones and Nasdaq markets all suffered significant losses of at least 2% today. But members of the Trump administration insist that the president's trade policy is already creating new jobs in America. The president himself was asked yesterday if there is a danger of recession and said there is a period of transition because what we're doing is very big. We're bringing wealth back to America. That's a big thing. It's a beautiful... No, I've just had that myself. It takes a little time, but I think it should be great for us. Look, I can't think of a single occasion where a trade war has ever resulted in anything but economic decline for the countries concerned.
Absolute disaster all round. I mean, I run a business. Tariffs will be dreadful. Either way, I think for the American people, they will eventually realise that tariffs are not the answer. And he's spraying these tariffs around like they're confetti. I mean, and they never work. And I think in the end they bring misery to everyone.
Well, because they are actually inflationary, aren't they, Andrew?
Yeah,
they are. And I think that there are some very few occasions where putting tariffs on certain goods, quite targeted, can be a sensible policy. When we put tariffs on Chinese steel, for example, when they were dumping excess steel onto European markets, which was killing the European steel industry to protect jobs, that's slightly different to what Trump seems to be doing. And it wasn't a generic, here's a huge tariffs on all your goods to try and get businesses to relocate to Europe. It was, they can work in certain contexts. They are an economic tool that used carefully, parsimoniously, can work. But that's not how Trump's using them. They're a kind of blunderbuss for him, and that will be damaging to the US economy and hopefully will be his downfall.
Rhun?
Yeah, I think we can all agree that they're not being used carefully. I think that the collapse that we're seeing is becoming clearer by the day. Be that through the stock markets and their performance. I think President Trump himself said that if the markets fell by such and such amount on 4 consecutive days, that'll be a disaster. He is engineering this. He's doing this for the people of America themselves. And there's also not just the economic harm. We're at a time when we need that global unity. We need to take a firm stand in the name of peace when it comes to Ukraine. That can't happen in the context of the kind of trade war that we're seeing being played out, led by President Trump at the moment. And it's quite remarkable seeing what's happening in Canadian politics now in response to what's happening, and the idea that more jobs can be created in the United States. How does Canadian lumber and Canadian oil fit in? How's that going to be generated in the United States? Surely there will come a time fairly soon when even pretty fervent pro-Trump Republicans can see the truth of the impacts of this economic war.
Rebecca.
I mean, I guess stock markets don't lie, do they? In the same way that betting markets don't tend to lie. And I think the evidence will be there irrefutably. And even if Trump gives a narrative that is saying something different, I think what Rhun's just said, people will see it for themselves. And, Wall Street's it's a big entity, isn't it? And if those stocks continue to do what they're doing, it's pretty black and white.
Why does your leader keep supporting Vance and Trump?
I think you'll have to ask her that. We've got to have a good relationship with America to keep ourselves in our position as another global leader. I think the Prime Minister's done exactly the same, hasn't he? He's been over and met with him and is seeking to work with him. It's not in our interest to not have a good relationship with America, and it's a particularly delicate balance at the moment because I think he's, like you said, spraying things around all over the place. It's hard to keep up with. But I think it's still vitally important that we have a strong US relationship.
Right, let's finish off with our usual fun question from Tommy in Glasgow. King Charles has today begun a baton relay which will finish in 500 days' time when the Commonwealth Games begins here. If you were part of the relay, which celebrity would you most like to be able to pass the baton on to? Andrew.
I mean, it's not the most exciting interaction with a celebrity, is it? They'd have their back to you and you pass it into their hand. So,
Beyonce.
Maybe. I won't elaborate on where that could go, actually.
No.
I was probably thinking more Mo Farah, as a runner. Quite an admirer of him, even though he's an Arsenal fan. So it's crossing a football divide for me.
I did see him win the medal in 2020.
Did you?
Live,
I watched it live in a pub, actually, at a friend's birthday. It was on in the pub, and it was just this wonderful thing of everyone sort of jumping up and down. And
I think that's a bit cheating, actually, because he really does run.
You wouldn't be able to keep up with him, of course.
Yeah, you wouldn't be able to.
He's a bit older now, isn't he? I mean, maybe he only jogs at a marathon. I'm sure if I sprinted, I could just about maybe,
Kiki.
Well, I think actually she's not a celebrity, but I think I would choose the Princess of Wales because she runs like the wind. If you've ever seen her running on a hockey pitch or any of those, and she really does run like the wind. So I'd probably have difficulty getting the baton to her, but and I admire her enormously. So,
but she's not a celebrity. No, never let it be said. No. Definitely not. No. Rebecca.
Well, I'm assuming it's not really a race, is it? So I'm guessing there could be a bit of interaction, and it might not be a, arm behind your back and a, seeing the back of someone's head rather than having a brief smile and conversation. So I would pick Lewis Hamilton. He starts his attempt with Ferrari to win his 8th championship on Sunday, and his slogan as he left Mercedes was, "It takes a team to make a dream." And I think when you're in politics, that's a really great reminder that actually you can't do this on your own. And I think F1 is my brilliant analogy of politics. You've got that whole team, but it's the one driver, and I admire him for what he's done so far.
There we are. Are we assuming that handing the baton is an act of kindness and support? In which case, I'll be very serious and say that we should all hand it on to Volodymyr Zelensky and wish him on.
Wish him on.
Wish him on.
It's the fun question, Rhun. You haven't quite got that, have you?
I don't try to think of him as a celebrity, certainly, but we can finish on that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Would he be tall enough to get it from you, though? That's the question.
I
think that's incumbent on him to make sure we have it.
OK, well, listen, thank you all very much indeed for coming on the programme this evening. Tomorrow's panel, Corey informs me, has MPs from each of the 4 largest parties in Parliament. I'm not sure they're all MPs, but anyway. Will Stone is from Labour, Sir Roger Gale from the Conservatives, Munira Wilson from the Liberals, Lib Dems, plus the free speech campaigner and former Brexit Party MEP Inaya Follower in Imam. So they'll be here to take your questions from 8 o'clock tomorrow. In the next hour, we are going to return to the subject of Online Safety Day, because it is Online Safety Day here at LBC. We've been covering the subject all day. We're going to be asking, what are your family's experiences of trying to keep children safe while they use online services? Now, I've got with me my colleague, Natasha Devon, LBC presenter, who regularly visits schools and speaks to children about their mental health. And I'm sure a lot of those conversations revolve around their experiences online. So that's the question. What are your family's experiences of trying to keep children safe while they're using online services? With Natasha Devon and me just in a moment. It's 0345 6060 973.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom, a crossbench peer has told LBC that the government is not putting children first when it comes to online safety. Baroness Biban Kidron, who campaigns to keep children safe